Hello everyone, welcome to another short video. In this video, we are going to look at zones, VLANs, and virtual wires in Palo Alto Firewall. First, let's look at what is zone. So, a zone is a container for the interfaces, okay, in the Palo Alto. And Palo Alto is a zone-based firewall. Then those zones are later used in the policies. Now, let's try to understand the zone from an image. So a zone is basically a specific area in our network, and the Palo Alto interface that connects to that zone, is then put into a specific logical container that is zone created on Palo Alto. So that's how your network is, segregated in zones, and then on Palo Alto you can create those zones and then bind the interfaces to them. One interface can only belong to one zone, that to of same type, but a zone can have multiple interfaces in it. Okay, as you can see in the sales zone, there are two Palo Alto interfaces, ETH1 by 2 and ETH1 by 3. Now, let's look at some other properties of the zone from the Palo Alto firewall. Let's click on add, and then you need to give the name of a zone. You can select type of a zone, tab, virtual wire, layer 2, layer 3, and tunnel. Tunnel zone we will talk about in our future videos. Here we will just look at the general settings of a zone. And then you can add interfaces to it by clicking on add and selecting the interface and then mentioning it here. You can also add an interface to zone from the interface itself, as we have seen in our previous videos. Now, zone protection. How do you protect a zone? So zone protection is basically the protection to the firewall itself from the traffic. So for that, we have zone protection profile. You can create a zone protection profile. And in zone protection profile, you define the settings for the flood protection, for reconnaissance protection, for port-based attack protection, protocol, Ethernet SGT, and L3, L4 header inspection. L3 4 header inspection is if there are any properties of layer 3 and L4 headers which you would like the firewall to, save itself from, then you define them here. And then you apply this zone protection profile on the zone, and whenever this zone protection profile detects anything, or it protects the firewall from something, it generates a log. That log is sent to the log setting here. Whatever the log server profile you will mention here, log forwarding profile you will mention here, the logs will be sent to it. Along with that, these logs will also be visible under monitor, under threat section. Okay, now let's go back to the zone. Click on zone. Yes. And you can see you also need to enable the layer 3 and layer 4 header inspection here as well in order to have that layer 3 and layer 4 header. Also, this also needs to be enabled at the global level here. Go under the device, and then you have to go under session, and then you see this L3 and L4 header inspection. This box needs to be checked and the firewall needs to be rebooted so that it comes in the picture. Now go to the network, and yes, zones, and then let's see. Yeah, so user identification ACL, whenever you want the firewall to recognize or try to figure out the user IDs for specific IP addresses coming on a zone, you need to check this box. What subnet should be included, and what subnet firewall shouldn't care about looking for the user IDs, that will go here. And similarly for the device ID. So that was about the zone in a Palo Alto firewall. Let's move on to VLANs. What is a VLAN? A VLAN is basically a layer 2 broadcast domain in its simplest terms. Let's look to it with a diagram. So here, if you see VLANs, you can see this red area entirely is a VLAN. So if a broadcast frame is sent by any of these devices, it will be received by all the machines in this VLAN. And also if there is a unicast frame is sent to the switch where the switch does not have learned its MAC yet, then it will be flooded in this area. Now if you see this area, here the green one, this area extends till firewall's interface. because firewall interface is of type layer 2 and entire layer 2 domain is a single broadcast domain. But here there is a layer 3 boundary. The firewall's ETH 1 by 1 is layer 3 interface and that creates a boundary. So the area is limited till here. Okay. Now let's look into the VLANs in the Palo Alto firewall. You click on add, then you give the VLAN a name, as you want, give it a name. And then this VLAN interface is really the layer 3 interface of the VLAN if you have created it under here. Interfaces VLAN, if you have created any here, then that gets bind in there, in this option here, second one. And what interfaces are part of this VLAN? You can choose from here, or you can, bind it directly on the layer 2 interface. Static MAC address configuration. Suppose one MAC address is there in your network that you always want your firewall to learn from a specific interface, then you create that binding here. In that case, firewall does not care about the dynamically learned MAC address. For if a MAC is learned dynamically on ETH 1 by 1, but you have mentioned ETH 1 by 2 here, then firewall will say no, this MAC is at 1 by 2. I know static about it. That was about VLANs. Now virtual wires. A virtual wire is basically used when you use the VWire, deployment. So let's look at the VWire thing. Click on add, name the VWire, and you can see there can be only two interfaces in a virtual wire. But still, yeah, you can bundle, you can aggregate the interface and then add it here. But basically, there will be two ends of a wire. Traffic comes from one end, goes to other end. That's it. No other fancy routing stuff. And then what VLANs, if suppose your traffic that is coming over the VWire has VLAN tags and you want to allow specific VLANs only, then you can mention those tags here. And this option, link state pass through, what does it do? Let's look at the VWire from an image, and then we will also understand what is link state pass through. So for VWire, you can see network 1 and network 2. Firewall has a vWire based connection. So this is, you can understand, this is one interface, this is other interface, and this is part of wires one end, and this is part of wires another end in the vWire configuration. And then the policies are created later on with the help of vWire zone. Now, what will happen? Suppose this interface goes down, then firewall will know this has gone down, but will this end know this has gone down? No. In order to pass the information of this end going down to here, we need to check that box link state pass through. That way, what happens? As soon as this port goes down, firewall brings this port down, and this end knows my wire has gone down. Okay, that's what was the link state pass through. That's it about this video. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.